Right now, a very serious warning is coming from within the Israeli military. The Israeli chief of staff even used the expression that the military could self-destruct. Let's take a closer look at this today. Let's get right into it. Currently, the Israeli military is clashing not only with Iran, but also with Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, while also waging a prolonged war of attrition against Hamas in Gaza. Simultaneous security operations in the West Bank and military actions on the Syrian border are raising concerns in the Israeli military about exceeding their capacity. A.R. Al-Jamir, the Israeli chief of staff, reportedly warned at a Southern Security Cabinet meeting that the military might not hold out. The fact that the current chief of staff used such strong language in a public setting is being interpreted as a sign that the situation is quite serious. The Times of Israel reports that the Israeli military is currently short about 12,000 soldiers for its standing army. In particular, about 7,000 of these are said to be combat troops. A shortage of combat troops is a completely different issue from a lack of rear support personnel. This means there aren't enough soldiers to actually be deployed to the front lines and carry out operations. Right now, Israel is operating its forces in multiple regions at the same time, so if there are losses on a particular front, it inevitably affects the military strength in other areas as well. Above all, this war has been going on continuously since 2023 without any real pause in fighting. Because of this, it's known that military fatigue has reached a significant level. Some reservists have served repeatedly for dozens of days, and as economic and livelihood issues mount, internal dissatisfaction is reportedly rising. Senior officials in the Israeli military have also admitted that the soldiers' fatigue is much more serious than expected. The bigger problem is that the manpower shortage is likely to become even greater starting next year. The reason for this is that Israel reduced the mandatory military service period for men from 36 months to 30 months in August 2024, even while the war is ongoing. Because of this, the first group of recruits under the new system will be discharged in January 2027. The Israeli military expects that if the current law is not changed, the shortage of both combat and non-combat personnel will increase by several thousand more. A.R. Al-Jamir, chief of staff of the Israeli military, has repeatedly called for extending men's mandatory service to 36 months, but the Israeli government has not agreed. As a result, there is a shortage of troops in many places, and even the burden on the reserves is rapidly increasing. The Israeli military has set the 2026 reserve service period at 55 days, but after the Middle East war, many reservists have already served 80 to 100 days due to frequent mobilizations. As a result, a significant number of reservists have suffered economic losses. Not only are there cases where they can't earn money, but it's also common for reservists to return from duty and find they've been fired from their jobs. The Israeli military is quickly deploying more female soldiers in combat roles to address troop shortages. As many of you know, Israel enforces mandatory conscription for women. When women turn 18, they are also required to serve in the military. Women currently make up about 33% of Israeli military personnel, reflecting the force's long history of a high proportion of female soldiers. However, recent analysis suggests that the roles of female soldiers are changing completely. Before the 2023 war, Israeli female soldiers were mostly assigned to tasks such as border surveillance, working at checkpoints, rear support, and monitoring duties. In fact, cases where they were deployed to full-scale combat zones were limited. The proportion of women in combat units was also not high. At that time, the percentage of female combat soldiers remained at about 14%. As the war in Gaza dragged on, the front in Lebanon remained active, and clashes with Iran added to the strain. The situation changed significantly. The proportion of female combat soldiers has risen to 21%, a rapid change even for the Israeli military. In particular, recently there have been more cases where female soldiers are being directly deployed to actual combat situations. It is known that they are active not only in the Gaza Strip and the Lebanon border area, but also in various fields such as tank units and search and rescue units. There were also reports that during Hamas's surprise attack, female tank crew members directly engaged with armed militants in the border area. In some units, female soldiers are even starting to be seen as a key force. From the perspective of the Israeli military, there aren't many options available. Reservist fatigue is growing and front lines are expanding, leading to more female soldiers being deployed in combat roles that were previously limited. This move faces significant internal controversy. Issues such as the problem of female prisoners of war, opposition from religious groups, and the operation of mixed-gender units are all emerging at the same time. Still, predictions suggest the Israeli military will expand female soldier roles to address its manpower gap. However, the government is well aware of the shortage of military personnel and is making every effort to fill the ranks. The Israeli government seems to be putting more emphasis on passing the Haredi conscription bill rather than extending the mandatory service period. First, let's find out what Haredi means. Haredi is known as a fundamentalist group within Judaism and is a sect of Judaism. The group of Jews who follow this ultra-conservative sect of Judaism are called Haredi. You can easily spot them in Israel because their clothing is very distinctive. They wear black suits and hats. Haredi, known for wearing white shirts, make up about 1.28 million people, or 13.5% of the population, and have significant influence. However, they have become a social issue since they don't pay taxes or serve in the military. Now, the Israeli government is considering drafting them, with around 80,000 eligible for service, but few actually enlist. Even if they do, the issue likely won't be resolved quickly. Let me explain why. Some Haredi have joined the Israeli military, but this sometimes proved more of a hindrance. The Haredi who enlisted in the military couldn't stand being in the army, so they caused a commotion within their units, saying they'd rather go to prison. There were even cases where they voluntarily went to the military prison. There were also cases where a female soldier was the commanding officer, but they refused to acknowledge female officers and showed that they wouldn't follow their orders. On Saturdays there, they can't do guard duty or train, and there were even cases of them arguing with the commanding officer about it. Above all, they insisted on resting unconditionally on the Sabbath, and even during war, they refused to comply. Because of this, even when Haredi are enlisted, other problems arise. The Israeli government is addressing the manpower issue by enlisting the Haredi, which has drawn significant criticism both within Israel and from political circles. Yair Lapid, leader of the main opposition party, Yesh Atid, criticized the government for stretching the front lines without strategy, resources, or manpower. The opposition, once cooperative during the war, now openly questions the government's competence. Especially now, the Israeli economy is under considerable strain due to the prolonged effects of the war. Israel is originally known as a country with an economy centered on high-tech industries and startups. It is a country with where the IT sector makes up a very large share of the economy, such as artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, semiconductors, and software development. However, the problem is that a significant number of the key personnel leading these industries are reservists. Since most Israeli citizens have military service experience, the longer the war lasts, the more civilian personnel are continuously drawn into the military. In fact, it has been reported that many companies have been experiencing manpower shortages since the war began. The impact has been especially severe in the startup industry. Key technical staff like developers, security engineers, and server admins have sometimes been called up as reservists for long periods, delaying projects or stopping development. It has been reported that some companies are finding it nearly impossible to operate normally when more than half of their key employees are called into the military. On top of this, there is also the issue of weakened investor sentiment. Israel has long been recognized as a powerhouse for startups that attract global investment, but with growing concerns due to the prolonged war, analysts say that foreign investors are becoming more cautious. For companies, this means they are facing both a shortage of personnel and a decline in investment at the same time. It has been reported that self-employed people and small businesses are also suffering significant damage, as more and more people who have been called up for reserve duty for extended periods are leaving their shops unattended or suspending their business operations. In fact, there are even stories of some reservists returning to work after their military service only to be notified that they have been laid off. In particular, as breadwinners who support their families are being sent to the front lines for extended periods, the burden on their businesses is also increasing rapidly. The Israeli government has introduced compensation policies, but as the war drags on, the financial burden increases. Israel now faces both military strain and growing economic fatigue. In the current situation, the most realistic solution is for Israel to reduce the scale of the front lines and lower the intensity of the war. Right now, Israel is facing not only conflict with Iran, but also fighting in the Gaza Strip. Israel is currently responding simultaneously to Lebanon, the Syrian border region, and the West Bank. Maintaining multiple fronts like this for an extended period inevitably creates a significant military burden. Problems such as troop shortages, reservist fatigue, and ongoing economic losses are continuing to accumulate. However, the issue is that Prime Minister Netanyahu is currently maintaining a hardline stance. The Netanyahu government continues to insist that the influence of Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran must all be weakened at the same time. Because of this, there is a high possibility that military operations will not be easily stopped. In particular, hardline factions within Israel are also expressing that now is not the time to back down, making it politically difficult to end the war. It seems likely that this issue will continue for some time.